Here's the question you need to ask yourself.
Are you ready to get casual? Grab your favorite adult beverage or combustible plant and join us for our roundtable TTRPG discussion. Oh yeah, it's time for Casual Friday. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, it's Casual Friday. I am GM Jim from the Wizards and the Wordslingers. Over there is...
I'm Brad from Direden.
And I'm Ryan Doyle. What's up, everybody? How we doing?
What is up, everybody? How you doing? Let us know. Let us know how you're feeling out there.
There he is.
Twin Steel's here, obviously. Hey, Twin Steel. So it's Friday. We're keeping it casual, and we're going to talk about 2024 Player's Handbook of Dungeons and Dragons.
What?
Yeah, I went for a dramatic read there. So what we're gonna do is first hold on real quick. So they put out the book for master tier subscribers on the 3rd of September, and it was a bit of a slow process getting it out. This was up for several hours, and this was the tweet. It took into the afternoon before we actually got access to it. And there, what do you guys want to do first? You want to talk about the drama? You want to talk about the errata and all that other stuff?
Yeah,
Sure.
let's give the people what they want, which is the drama.
the juicy drama.
The crisis.
Oh, we just got a bunch of people show up all at once. Hey.
No, that was me. I forgot to click off just to my channel.
Oh, that's mostly us chatting.
It's all me. I'm everywhere.
It's all
Join us in
Ryan.
the chat. We're not just here, we're in the chat. How cool is that? Oh, that would be Fred. And
Fred and Nacho are in the future, checking in. Things are much better, hopefully.
Brad or Ryan, one of you tell us about some of the drama that's happened with the errata and other things.
Well, I'll go first because I dodged most of it because I followed my own advice, and I got a physical book, and I supported my friendly local neighborhood game shop, and the camera's doing an okay job picking it up. This filigree special edition, real pretty. I thought about not getting it because it turns out a bunch of stuff in here, it's already wrong, but I don't care because I have a physical book.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of disappointing, but like that's all it is. There's some disappointment that they didn't have everything nailed down when they went to publish this. There's clearly a few mistakes in there that have to be. There's going to be an errata. We knew there would be an errata. It's just kind of surprising that it happened so quickly. But then also on top of that, you had the transition on D&D Beyond didn't go all that well, from a technical side of things. So D&D Beyond is quickly trying to do errata on the fly while also having a struggle of keeping up with the changes. So D&D Beyond is just the best right now. But
yeah, there was a lot of stuff like this. I took this screenshot when I was making a monk. There's a lot of broken code in various places. Just little things like that.
And overall, it's nowhere near the drama point that I think some people made it out to be. But such is D&D and the internet these days. So is what it is.
Yeah, that's just how the hobby works. I think I was watching a video by Ted from Nerd Immersion, and I think he said there were 6 or 7 erratas for 2014 over the first 4 years.
It's a tricky measure because an errata is them releasing essentially a new revised version of the book. So that's not 6 things that they changed. That's 6 batches where they took all of the changes and hit print essentially. So it's like it's a hard thing to quantify.
Well, and typically, my understanding was they would publish the online errata whenever they printed a second or third printing. Every time they did a new printing, they would update the changes. So, if you bought a book that was the fourth printing, it's going to read slightly different than the first printing, second printing, so forth and so on. So we're used to seeing that. It's just weird to kind of watch it happen live, because we're now able to see the changes in D&D Beyond, where you log on one day and it says one thing and the next day it says something different.
And it goes to show you how important just like goodwill from your audience is, and how dumb and bad it is to squander it, right? Because this is like predictable, potentially inevitable rollout issues that like every company is going to have. But like just the degree of scrutiny on Wizards of the Coast. I mean, one, because whatever, there's an industry of people trying to profit off of it. But two, because they did a bunch of dumb stuff in a row. Now everything is blown out of proportion because they have laser focus vultures circling, waiting for them to misstep every time.
Yeah, I think people would be far more understanding of all of this if it wasn't for the OGL. I think everybody, like you said, everybody's laser focused. Everybody's cackles are up. We're looking for Wizard to screw up. So,
yeah, and I think if you look at what happened with the changelog fiasco, with them admitting that they were going to hide legacy content on the character builder, people freaked out and they changed their tune, and that all happened over a weekend, pretty much. So their WotC's crisis response team, whatever capacity they are, I think they did well that time.
Yeah, I agree.
And I bet some of this was caused by that. Like they had a plan going into it that changed a week before launch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is the fact that there are mistakes in the book to begin with is kind of surprising. With as much lead time as I had going into this. But I will say, one of the things I like about this edition is they didn't give overly wordy descriptions of stuff. It looks like they tried to trim the fat. They tried to streamline content. And I think in some places they streamlined it a little too much. And in doing so, you got like kind of contradictory things and things that weren't clear. So that's a hard spot to land, where you're trying to be concise but also thorough. So I can, with that perspective, I can be a little bit forgiving that there's some mistakes in the 2024 edition, but it is surprising that you're going to roll out a new book and not just like overlooking things, but actually have contradictory things. So
it feels like some of the things because it's a lot of things, but it feels like some of them would have come out in the wash in playtesting, like would have been discovered through better playtest processes.
Yeah, well, like the Goliath ability, like the Goliath has the way the Goliath ability is worded is like it has advantage on grappling saving throws or something like that.
Yeah, it said saving throws to break out of grapple, but you don't use a saving throw to break out of a grapple.
Right. So the Goliath's ability like didn't fit with the actual rules of grappling. Like that's a mistake that I'm kind of like, yeah, you should have caught that.
Yeah. But I mean, all that being said, yeah, I mean they're responsive. So half of the company is doing their best, and the other half is trying to stab us in the back. So that's why every time we talk about this stuff, at least I am super conflicted.
We don't know which half we're gonna get.
Nope. Keeps it interesting. But there's a lot to like in this book, and I rather talk about that for more of the time than getting stabbed in the back by D&D Beyond or whatever.
Yeah, we can shift over into talking about the book now. There were a couple things up top I wanted to mention. One, that in D&D Beyond they have this legacy switch now,
Thank you.
which is a much better solution to leave it up to the dungeon master and the players whether or not they want the legacy content visible. Because in my experience, I've played around and built a few characters. Mixing the new and the old stuff, not nearly as bad as I expected it would be. But with this legacy toggle, you can let the past die, kill it if you have to. But the mixing of the old and new, it actually seemed to work pretty well fine.
Yeah, as long as you're not like trying to optimize or min max by slicing and dicing rules from one with the other, like I think that gets sticky. But if you're using the core 2024 rules, but you're still using 2014 subclasses, it seems to work fine.
Yeah, and I'll be the first to admit I was wrong. I expected that to be untrue. I did not believe that it was going to be as backward compatible as it is, and and credit where credit's due. I'm pleasantly surprised. I still would have preferred 6th edition, but they did it. They made a backwards compatible thing, at least for now.
Yeah.
All right, so you guys want to talk about the book?
I want to talk about your character's name being Henceforth, because I love that, and I don't want to let that pass by without comment.
Yeah, I stole that from some random guy I played in a one-shot with. He played a fighter named Henceforth, and so that's one of my default names now.
I love it.
So who wants to we should start with the introduction and chapter 1. We don't need to go page by page, go over everything, but who wants to jump in first with their thoughts on chapter 1?
I thought one of the things that stood out to me were the examples of play, which I think is in more than just chapter 1, but it starts there in chapter 1 with the examples of play, and I think those are good and very user friendly and worthwhile additions, in my opinion.
And I really like that it's a 2-column, like, here's the example of play, here's the highlighted thing that we're showing you the example of, instead of here's all the rules, here's an example of play that you're going to skip over. Like, having them side by side, highlighted, like, this is a intelligence check. It's an intelligence check using investigation, which adds your proficiency bonus. I think that is super user friendly. Mm-hmm. I think, like a lot of people, I kind of sped read through the first chapter looking for things that were different so I could get to the interesting stuff to me. But I reread it this morning in preparation for this conversation, with trying to put myself in the mindset of someone who's coming to D&D for the first time. This is going to be literally the first pages of whatever 5.5 5R that we're exposing you to. How helpful is it? How confusing is it? And I think they did a very good job onboarding new people to the game, or new people to the edition, right? Maybe all about 3.5, you never made the jump to 5 or 4, and now here you are coming to this new edition. I think it's got a lot of good changes from the 2014 in content and in layout to make it easier to onboard new people.
Yeah, I think the content and layout is going to be good for the brand new person coming in, and I also think there's enough of the AD&D bones here that people who are coming back to the game who haven't played in a long time, who maybe have skipped the last few editions, like you were saying, Ryan, those people are still going to see those AD&D roots in this, which that was my experience in 2014, right? Like I had played 3.5. I didn't love it. I didn't play it very much, and I played, I tried 4th edition for maybe 4 sessions, didn't like it, So I when I saw D&D Next and how much it felt familiar to me, it felt more like first edition. That's when I fell in love with fifth edition, because it had a lot of sensibility and new design, but it still felt like D&D to me. And I think that is the one good thing about the carryover, that it's not a whole new sixth edition. That there is that familiarity, that somebody who quit playing back at like 3.5 or quit playing back in second edition, they come back to D&D now, they're going to see enough of their old game in this, while at the same time it's easier to read, it's more user friendly for the new player as well. So I think those are two big accomplishments that we can give them credit for.
Yeah, overall, I like everything in Chapter 1. I think it's smarter to start off with how to play. I remember a couple years ago building a character in D&D Beyond. The very first thing you do is it gives you some general rules that are very confusing and really of no help. It's like, the first thing you need to know is that you always round down. I'm like, okay, well, when do I do that? Are you going to explain that? The second thing you need to know is that specific beach general. Okay, like, can you give me an example? What the third thing you need to know? And that's how the character creation process started. And I was like, if I didn't already know how to play D&D, I might be out right here on this first screen, because it's like it's really not helping me.
Don't lead with the math.
Don't lead with the math. There's some things I noticed here in Chapter 1. Like, there's this section here. It says, on round down, whenever you divide or multiply a number in the game, round down if you end up with a fraction, even if the fraction is 1/2 or greater. Some rules make an exception and tell you to round up. And so that was the standard in 2014 5th edition D&D. They had the very similar message. But I noticed there were several places in Chapter 1 and beyond where it will tell you half and it still says round down. There are 4 or 5 places like that. And I was like, did they just not cut those out? Because it doesn't always say it. Sometimes it just uses the default rule, but then sometimes it specifically says round down. And I'm like, if you're trying to save space on a 384-page book, I don't understand why they didn't cut that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from a layout and design perspective, it's not fantastic. Like it's an improvement. I think there's definitely improvement over previous editions with design and layout. But if we're comparing this to, how sleek and well laid out a lot of OSR products are, like, this still pales in comparison to like Shadow Dark and Old School Essentials. Is how well those books are laid out and how easy those books are to read. And obviously those are more streamlined games, so they're easier to read that way. But I mean, easier to read from a layout and design perspective.
Yeah, I think because I've been looking at like designing again for new stuff, right? Like one of my passes through this book was like, all right, making subclasses or adventures for this, and like the technical writing side of it all. And I think 5e gets itself into a lot of sticky corners because it is exception based, right? Specific beats general. That is the fundamental idea. So if I say something specific, it's almost implied. It is implied that it's different than the general rule. So if I say round down in a specific circumstance, that there's like this implicit thing that like, oh, that's exceptional, and typically you wouldn't round down. So you paint yourself into a corner where clarifying things confuses things more. And I think it's just like fundamentally in the bones of how the operating system of the game works. And I don't know how you get rid of that other than like grammatically, right? Like if it's in parentheses, then it's reinforcing an example and it's not changing the rules or whatever. But like that, I don't know how clarifying that would be.
Yeah. I mean, overall, like, I give them credit for taking steps in the right direction, like with the more concise wording, more streamlined rules, better layout, but it's still not the industry standard in any of those three categories. Which is surprising for the company that's clearly making the most money in the industry, right? So I think there's a lot of other game companies out there, Free League, just to name one off the top of my head, that does a far better job with all of those aspects.
I wonder if it's because of small beats big in so many creative endeavors. Like a small team of 3 people is maybe going to produce a better product than a team of 30 people and a bunch of contractors.
Yeah, that's probably very true.
Probably true. All right. Moving on to chapter 2, unless anybody has other thoughts on that first chapter. So we're just really giving first impressions. We're not doing a deep dive or anything like that. Just putting our toesies in the water.
I liked... Actually, it might be chapter 2 stuff I'm thinking of.
Well, let's talk about chapter 2 then, shall we?
Sure.
Chapter 2 is called Creating a Character. I have some thoughts here. I took a screenshot of this. I really, really like the complexity column for the class overview. I don't think they had this in 5.0, did they? I'm pretty sure they did not, because this is too user-friendly, and this is a great thing for new people, because as we all know, high complexity classes like the Druid, they don't tell you that in the book right away, and they didn't in the 2014 5th edition of D&D. It wasn't like, hey dude, you should really consider a fighter or maybe a rogue, a sorcerer, a warlock. You have to have somebody to tell you that. But here in this column, it tells you exactly. But Ryan, I saw you get very excited when I started talking about this. What were you about to say?
I love it. I think there's a lot of cool quality of life beginner tables in here, standard array by class. Thank you. That was one of those things I was like, we should have been doing that for 10 years. That's how you know it's a good idea. But can you flip back to that for a second? Because I have a question. All right.
Okay.
That's I second guess the first entry and the last entry. The harder the last entry in this chart. So barbarian, I generally pitch as low complexity. I guess it depends which fighter subclass you're comparing it to, or what barbarian subclass you're comparing it to. But would you place a wizard as lower complexity compared to a sorcerer or a warlock, say?
No, I would flip warlock and wizard in that list.
Okay.
Warlock is definitely average and wizard is high. Wizard's you can cast almost any spell. How would that not be complex? You have to be able to be not the kind of person who freaks out with choice paralysis when you're a wizard, because it's going to happen every single turn. You're going to have a plan, then the bad guys are going to go and they're going to mess up your plan. Then your ally is going to do something unexpected and mess up your other plan. They're going to have to be like, crap, and now I have to go look through 30 spells in the next 22 seconds to figure out what I'm going to do.
Yeah, that table legit made me go back to the wizard section and be like, oh, did they fundamentally change the wizard in a way that I completely missed? Because how is it not one of, if not the most complex things to run at the table?
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is that where I could say that the warlock is higher complexity than the wizard would be the initial learning curve. I feel like how do you play a wizard? You cast spells, right? So that is probably less complex than how do you play a warlock? Well, you have to pick invocations. You have to pick, your patron, right? There's some moving parts to the warlock on the front end. So I would say that maybe the warlock has a higher learning curve at the beginning, but to actually play the class well, yeah, wizard is definitely a high complexity class.
That's interesting. Maybe I misunderstood the point of that table.
That's just me trying to make sense of it, because my first reaction was the same as yours.
No, I mean
it's
that's an insightful argument for sure. A wizard might be easier to build. Yeah. And it doesn't really say choose a class and like it's just like the class's complexity. It doesn't say
Yeah.
it's in the character creation section. It's the first like actual table in character creation, so maybe that is what they're referring to. I don't know if that's as important as understanding how it plays at the table. But I think you actually are onto something there.
Wizards and Warp Drives here asked about milestone leveling. I have not seen anything about milestone leveling in the 2024 PHB. It's all been about XP leveling. It's very possible. I don't know, in 2014, was milestone in the PHB or was it in the DMG? Was it listed as like an optional DMG rule?
Great question. I could tell you in a minute, but no, I do not. Looking at the index, I do not see milestone.
Yeah, I agree with Twin Steel here. We assume it's probably in the DMG listed as an alternate rule. But I did find that interesting that standard XP grinding is still the default in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing anything about milestone. I'm double checking in the rules glossary right now to see if milestone is in the rule glossary. Which, by the way, that's one of the. I mean, I know we're not there yet, chapter wise, but that is one of the very nice features of this book is the rules glossary.
Ryan Likey. I don't see milestone in the index for 2014 either.
Huh? So it was always in the DMG.
What do you guys think about the new bone white parchment background?
I didn't even notice it was different.
I mean, I noticed it was like slightly tonally different. That's funny. You think I just spent so long thinking about backgrounds on pages and shit, and like it's still not all that important to me. I think if you notice it, they might have screwed up, right? Maybe it's one of those things. If it really jumps out at you, then maybe somebody turned up the contrast too high or something. It is lighter.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the physical book yet. I've only been operating on the D&D Beyond version because my book is still in transit.
One thing I noticed about this chapter is there's a section that says backgrounds and species from older books, and there's an interesting tidbit in here. Backgrounds in older D&D books don't include ability score adjustments if you're using a background from an older book, blah, 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 blah. And also, if the background you choose doesn't provide a feat, you gain an origin feat of your choice, because even if you're using older stuff, they still want you to have feats. It's all, you get a feat, and you get a feat. Oprah's out here slinging feats out to the studio audience, because I think feats in supplemental books are going to be one of their main money makers. If they bring back a la carte, they'll bring back feats, 99 cents a feat. I think that's probably what's going to happen. Yeah, everyone gets a feat now.
And you can do cool. I like it being tied to background. I do see the capitalist agenda infiltrating my hobby at every corner, but I do love the idea of like, hey, we're running this campaign in this setting. There's 7 backgrounds in this book. Please pick one. Each comes with a feat that's going to be like relevant to this adventure. Pathfinder does a great job of doing that, and I think it creates potential, at least, for more interesting characters connected to the story they're in.
Yeah, I agree. I like the idea of when a campaign setting comes out or a new adventure comes out that's in a different location, the idea of having feats unique to that campaign setting. I did that, like I homebrewed that for one of my campaigns. The players really seemed to like it, and it was a good way. Like I took a bunch of the 24. This was back years ago, so I took a bunch of the 2014 feats that were way underutilized, and then I made up a list of my own custom feats, and I assigned them to different regions to kind of reflect the culture of the different regions. So it was a way to get my players, because if they're told, hey, you get a feat at first level, they're going to be like, oh, cool, what feats can I take? Well, then the way to look at that, the way I wrote it up was, it was divided by region on the map. So it got the players invested in the game world by optimizing their character and choosing their feat. That's potentially some good design that you could build into future adventures.
Yeah, I think Wizards and Warp Drives is correct here that players are going to choose backgrounds based on feats rather than flavor. And I think that's fine. I think there was very little reason to choose one background over another in 5e. Anyway, the backgrounds were mostly useless. There's one thing I noticed here in this chapter is you get all these series of tables for each of the 6 ability scores, and it tells you can roll 1d4 if your ability score is high or low to get a descriptor. When I first saw this, I thought it was dumb. Then a couple days passed and I was thinking about it more, and I actually really, really like this.
I think you thought it was dumb because you don't need this, because you got a brain full of adjectives, my man.
Yeah, it's designed for, if you're playing a paladin, you've got high strength and high con, you could be sinewy and energetic. And it's just a great way for a newbie to build a list of keywords that they can then develop a personality and roleplay from. Like, I've always said this, I stick by it, ideals, bonds, and flaws in 5e is a dumb system because it's not useful. Because it gives you all these sentences about yourself, and that stuff's not really useful to me in the moment. Like a keyword like twitchy or suspicious or grumpy. Like, I can build a character based on that one keyword of grumpy much easier than I can a paragraph long description of backstory. And so I think this is a great shorthand for new players. I very much approve of this.
Yeah, big fan of punchy keywords over long descriptions. I have a fidgety high dex character versus a lithe high dex character that tells me a lot. That informs my mental image of those characters immediately. I don't agree with every entry in these.
Mike, to answer the question in chat, I think this is just meant to be suggested. It's just meant to be a suggested way that you can build your character, and it's really the first place in here I've seen that reinforces the idea that your stats are your character. You're strong or you're not, you're dexterous or you're not, you have high constitution or you don't. And so the stats are what determines the character, and so these are a way that you can take away some descriptors to make it a little easier to manage that, especially if you're new.
Yeah, and Scott just said in chat that he loves the art, like that every class starts with a full page of art. And I would add to that, I like the fact that there is art for each subclass.
Yes.
I thought it was really great and an improvement over previous editions. The just sheer amount of art I thought was great. I don't love all the art that's in there, but the fact that there's so much art, and there is a lot of art to love in there, I thought was really great.
There was one other interesting thing I noticed in looking through all of the spellcasters in this chapter. I distinctly remember it was either Jeremy Crawford or Chris Perkins. I can't tell them apart sometimes. One of them in an interview in the last couple months said, all spellcasters are prepared spellcasters now. And I thought that was very interesting. How are they going to change all these spellcasters? And one thing I noticed is that a couple weeks ago in a blog post about Rangers, they said a Ranger can swap out one spell at each long rest. And so I thought, oh, okay, so this is what all spellcasters are now. But they are mostly not. As far as I can tell, the Ranger is maybe the only one who gets to swap out one spell each long rest. I saw that Warlocks, Sorcerers, were swap out only at level up. Warlocks, Sorcerers, and also Paladins. Paladins in 2014 were full prepared spellcasters, like they could prepare their spell list every day. Paladins can only swap out one spell every day now. So they say they're all prepared, but the meaning of that word has changed in 2024. Some now prepare spells every day. Some prepare one spell a day. Some prepare spells when they level up. And so that is a very interesting semantic change, I think.
It was Crawford, and Crawford said a lot of things.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
So is it? I'm looking at the wizard here. Is the wizard the only one that lets you swap out your whole prepared list each day, or does cleric let you do that again too?
I don't even remember, man. I think maybe the druid and the cleric are still. The druid at level 1. It's a really exciting TV watching us look at screens.
But yeah, I know that's one of the things that helps the classes feel different is how they each approach spells slightly differently. That's a tough thing for me because like I want it to be easier, right, to understand, but at the same time I remember how I didn't like 4th edition where everything was, you know, daily powers and encounter powers and at will powers, and that made everything feel samey, right? So it's like, you know, it might just be hard to find that balance between like creating a streamlined style of play and still making each class feel unique from the other classes.
This might be a controversial take, but I like Magic being complex and difficult, especially wizard magic, right? Like, and that's how I pitch it to players. Like, hey, brand new person to D&D, I will let you play a wizard, but it is more difficult on you. You're going to have more homework to do. You can't expect me to know what every spell's going to be. You can change all these spells. You're going to go through a lot of it. It's going to be more effort on your part to wield magic than swing a sword. And that is in line with what your character is doing. I think that is by design. I think fundamentally they assume it's simpler than it actually is, from the design team at least.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm okay with it being hard to run a wizard because it's hard to be a wizard. Like, you are hitting the books harder because that is in line with the class fantasy. So if you want to be powerful in casting spells and not thinking that much, well, that table is still confusing to me. But like, okay, a sorcerer is a lot like a wizard, but it's in your blood. You got 2-3 things, or you convince some demon at the crossroads to give you a little bit of magic and like, oh, you got one spell, but it's a good one. And you got like, oh, you got another couple slots, but you'll forget about them. It parallels the character to me. And maybe that's just rationalization, but that's my take.
Yeah. No, that's a solid take.
Kevin here asked about warlocks. We're not actually into the class chapter yet, but warlocks are not nearly as reliant on Eldritch Blast. They are more flexible, and you can build a non-Eldritch Blast warlock who would be perfectly effective now, it seems like. One other thing I noted in this chapter is that alignment is largely untouched. They did very little to it. I do like they have this personality trait by alignment chart, which I like. Goes along with that ability score chart. Just an option. Some tables to roll on if you want to help determine your personality.
I did like the I guess I'll call them descriptions of the alignments. They're not quite examples, but I did like the text that came along with like describing the alignments. At least in the book, it's on 39. I don't know, but like, a rebel who waylays a cruel baron's tax collectors and uses the stolen money to help poor is probably chaotic good. You know, someone who's bored by moral debate, probably neutral. Like, I find that all instructive in a way that, like, chaotic neutral on its own in a table doesn't help a new person on board.
Yeah. Yeah, it's better in general.
Yeah, I like the one that was in the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide, where it had like a list of like, I think it was like 5 or 6 values. I think it was 6 values for each alignment, and I thought that was also pretty useful as a way to. It was in the Dungeon Master's Guide under building NPCs. So I'd be curious to take this that's in the player's handbook and that's in the old Dungeon Master's Guide and put them side by side and see if there's a way to build a good character just through the lens of alignment.
Yeah, there's a little bit of overlap with like the personality trait and the values, but at the end of the day, they are different things. And I wonder, yeah, I wish I had the DMG right now. I really do, because it's like this makes me so curious about like what's in there, what's missing. If like what's I think should be in here is in there, then I'm okay with it. If it's not in there, and then I'm upset.
No, and that's a really good point. Is we're not going to be able to judge the quality of this edition until we see the other 2 books, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
because,
we have a third of the game right now.
Yeah, because like one of the things I like about this is how well the classes are balanced. Like all the classes seem, significantly closer to each other in power level, but we don't know how well the game is balanced until we see the monster manual, right? We don't know how well things are going to look until we see the new challenge rating system and how the monsters are designed. Is the monster manual going to be an answer to what looks like power creep in the player's handbook, right? And then also, is the Dungeon Master's Guide going to give us good tools to help new players be able to run the game? Because ultimately, that's the pass fail on a game is, do you have enough people to run the game to support a player base?
And I'm just looking at J. Scott disagreeing with me, which you did it respectfully. I'm here for it. I'll take those comments all day. I think that's true as long as the Dungeon Master didn't just start playing D&D. You got a group of 5 people who've never played D&D before, and now one of them has to learn 5 classes because the other 4 aren't fully learning 1. Right, like I always try to go back to like, okay, if people coming in from 0, like me, I'm not going to be like, you just started, I'm not going to help you learn your wizard spells because I'm a curmudgeonly jerk. But if I've just started, expecting me to learn all your stuff when I also have to learn the entirety of the game, I don't think is a recipe for fixing a Dungeon Master crisis.
I just want to address J. Scott's other comment here real quick. J. Scott, I got my book through a Russian bootlegger. It cost me 3 extra pairs of blue jeans to get it early. It was worth it, though.
It's mostly in English. Extra stripe, very good deal. I went to my friendly local neighborhood game shop and I got the special cover because I guess I'm a simp. I don't know what it makes me, but yeah, support your friendly local neighborhood game shop.
Well, is that the only one you can get at the game store now as a special edition?
No, they had both. And they had both. They have them both 2 weeks early. That's a choice that Wizards of the Coast is making that I respect and appreciate and will keep saying, if I'm going to call them out for all the stupid shit that they're doing, I feel obligated to say, like, this is a good thing that they are doing. They're fundamentally supporting the existence of game stores when they don't necessarily have to. In the sense, they're cutting their margins by doing that. Support. We're running out of third places in our society. Support game shops. Even Wizards of the Coast is doing it. Why can't you?
No, that's great. That's good to hear. No, I pre-ordered mine on D&D website in order to get it early so I could do video content. So yeah,
Of course.
that was my journey. It's not very exciting.
All right, you guys want to talk about the classes in Chapter 3?
Yeah. Well, and like I said, I already mentioned the fact that I do like how closely balanced the different classes are to each other. I feel like there's not blatant gaps in power level between the classes like there seemed to be in 5th edition.
I just want to highlight before we leave chapter 2
Mm.
the reorganization of the creating a character structure. Step 1, talk to your dungeon master about what kind of game they're running. Thank you. Amazing. That might have been in 2014, but I think a lot of people overlooked it. Step 2, class. Not species, background, class. Class, background, equipment, species. You could feel a certain way about species being like relegated to like the bottom of the bin as far as how impactful it is.
Mm.
But starting with class is phenomenal, and then like your life experiences having more of an impact than your genetics. Probably in most heroic stories of like your character is fundamentally exceptional in every way. I don't care what an average member of your tribe is like; they are tens across the board, right? Your class and your background are more impactful. Class. Start there every time.
Class.
Well, and that fits what they were, saying during the playtest, right? Their goal was to make the class fantasies stand out, right? They wanted to make the roguiest rogue, the most wizardy wizard, the fightiest fighter, right? And I think with one glaring exception, Ranger, they accomplished that. Like I feel like the new classes do feel like they play very much like the power fantasy that comes with that class. So, I think what that observation you just made, Ryan, goes hand in hand with that goal of trying to build the game around those power fantasies, so that when someone wants to play a wizard, they feel like a wizard. When someone wants to play a fighter, they feel like a fighter, so forth and so on, right? And we bring up the Ranger again. I don't think it's an issue like last time where like the Ranger feels underpowered. It just doesn't feel thematic, right? That's my take. But overall, other than that, I think the class design is solid.
There's one thing I really like at the beginning of chapter 3 here is that they have all the classes and all the subclasses with a one sentence summary of each. I like this a lot. I feel like this is really useful for new people who, when you sit down to play D&D for the first time and the difference between a barbarian, a fighter, and a paladin is entirely baffling. That, with the fighter it says master weapons and armor. With the barbarian it says storm with rage. These are very clear-cut, easy descriptors that can help someone who is never played before or is maybe thinking of trying a class they haven't played before. Really excellent summaries here. I very much approve of this.
Yeah, and they include the subclasses in that as well to kind of help you. I think this is a good way to help new players pick a character class.
Yeah, I love the concept of like, here's the book, pick out a picture, and that's who you're playing. Theoretically, I've never really seen it work out in practice. People want to get a little more hands-on than that, and I think that like one sentence description is like, again, punchy keywords do so much more than paragraphs and paragraphs of text.
In general, across all the classes, I've noticed that a lot more classes now get some type of bonus action disengage or some type of free disengage, which I approve of this. Fewer opportunity attacks means more battle movement.
Yeah.
Most people in 5e rush right in up to the monsters, and then everybody stays there because nobody wants an opportunity attack. And so more ways to get around that makes combat way better because movement makes combat more fun.
Agreed. Yeah.
The Ranger is as bad as you thought. Sorry, Brad. Go ahead.
It's
just to clarify, because a couple questions there about what I was saying about the Ranger. I don't think the Ranger, like I said, is underpowered. I think mechanically it's still going to do a decent amount of damage and be able to keep pace with the fighter and the barbarian and paladin. I think the math is going to work out. It doesn't it doesn't feel like that fantasy of, you know, being a wilderness explorer and, you know, supporting your group by understanding the environment. It's just everything is very. It almost feels like the 2014 Warlock. How the 2014 Warlock was very dependent on Eldritch Blast and Hex. Now the Ranger is even more dependent on Hunter's Mark, right? And it doesn't deliver on flavor, I guess is my point there.
Yeah, and I always say, like, to your point, like the ranger isn't the rangeriest ranger it couldn't be, and I think you have to look outside of the class structure to fix that problem, right? The rangeriest ranger is awesome at exploring the wilderness, and 5e doesn't do that unless you really force it to and shove another game in there. So that I think that is fundamentally the problem with the ranger. It's not he's not putting up the DPS. It's that his turn in the spotlight doesn't really come, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, well, and it just goes back to the ranger is still very dependent on the dungeon master and the player who's playing them to make the ranger feel cool.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a symptom of the larger problem that D&D doesn't have a thorough exploration pillar or social pillar. But honestly, how many games really do have a solid exploration pillar or social pillar? So
yeah, off the top of my head, Dolmenwood is like my was where my heart's living right now. We've transitioned away from it in my games, but Dolmenwood does exploration pretty well. There's a Shadow Dark exploration in the works, which I'm definitely interested in.
yeah,
But that's not everybody's cup of tea. It's not. I think it's the third oblong peg of the stool because it's not everybody's favorite. People are in it for the combat. I'm a weird bird and I want exploration.
Yeah, Forbidden Lands is one game that has some good exploration mechanics in it. But yeah, I've yet to see a game that has a really solid exploration pillar and a really solid social pillar and a really solid combat pillar. Like, so.
Do we want to go talk about class by class? We can all just give because we're just giving our first take impressions.
Yeah,
sure, man.
I like that.
Barbarian. My first thoughts on the Barbarian were I do not like strength, perception, and stealth in the primal knowledge. I just don't buy it. Using strength for stealth, I don't buy it.
Your eyes are a muscle, man. No, I don't like it either.
Also, the Path of the World Tree Barbarian gets at level 3 something called Life-Giving Force, which they can give another creature temporary hit points every single round they are raging. And I've noticed a few classes get this, the ability to respawn temporary hit points, which is probably the biggest balance nightmare. If anything is going to break a balance, it's this ability several classes have now to just spontaneously invent temporary hit points whenever they need them. Like the I think it was the sorcerer who gets temporary hit points to somebody, or maybe it was the cleric on a cantrip. I don't remember now, but there are a few classes that have this. This is my biggest concern with game balance in 5.5. Also, thoughts on the Barbarian?
Overall, I like the improvement to rage. The idea that it's like you as a player decide when to rage, and then you have to do things to maintain that rage, right? I think that's better design. It puts more emphasis on the player to maintain their rage than for the dungeon master to police when rage is going to end, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just better design.
Yeah, again, controversial, but I think the players should pull their weight. Damn it. It's gonna get more extreme every time I say it. On back to the temporary hit point thing being even more readily available through class features and all. It's temporary hit points, the sleeping rules. Slow down the game a lot. I mean, yeah, and the fact that temporary hit points do not stack. So the second you have two characters trying to hand out temporary hit points, they start stepping on each other's toes real quick. Especially when you're figuring out, okay, well, no, he got him last time and he still got 7, so I'm going to put my 3 over here because he's still got 4 from you. I'm like, that's always less than fun for me.
Yeah.
Indeed. All right, any last thoughts on the Barbarian?
I'm ready to move on from Barbarian, but I'm looking something up because I have a thought on the temporary hit points thing too. But we can come back to that as we go through the other classes.
Let's talk about the Bard. Ryan, what do you think about the new Bard?
I mean, I like it. I'm so conflicted about like coming down on my opinion of a third of a game with like all of this. I will say I like the subclass divisions for flavor for Bard and for most things. I didn't know if I was gonna like that because like the first thing I saw was like the subclasses they didn't do, right? That was like top of mind for me. But I think they did a pretty good job giving individuated paths that will feel fairly different, right? Like College of Dance, I guess, is the example here where it's just like, cool, there's other ways to Bard, right? And this Bard's going to look a lot different than like the vanilla, whatever, College of Lore.
Yeah, I'm most interested in the College of Dance, not so much the actual design. I think the design of the Bard is fine, but I'm curious to see how my players. I know they're going to get weird with College of Dance. I'm sure. I'm looking forward to whichever one of my players decides to play dance first, and how that's going to get interpreted at my table.
I mean, I've never really been interested in bards all that much before. Ryan, I know you're the opposite, but the College of Dance looks pretty dope with all those extra unarmed strikes and stuff. You know, I'll be a capoeira bard. That sounds pretty fun.
Oh, I love that. I fucking love that. I was thinking I have like Shadow Dance in my Shadow Dance? What's the I don't know. That's a stupid 80s movie. Anyway, capoeira bard every time. Let's go. That's my new favorite thing. I like the fact that like College of Glamour is like straight up glam rock, right? Like I've run 2 bards. I've run multiple bards, but they're either David Bowie or they're Jack Black, and I love that they've gone full Bowie.
Yeah.
So bards only prepare spells on level up.
Right, which is not.
Bard.
I guess everyone prepares spells, right? Like, what is that? You're in charge. Stop making it worse. Ray gun. Oh, stop the presses. Wait a minute. That's my new subclass.
Oh, the Australian Olympic breakdancer.
Yeah.
Wow, the breakdancing is in the Olympics.
Hey, Oceania, how do you feel about your whole region being represented now by Raygun?
College of Dance Bard among distinct enough? I think so, because the College of Dance Bard is still mostly focused on inspiration and magic.
I think bards get a bad rap. Bards are the best support casters, and as such allow you to be involved in everybody else's turn and like boosting your allies in a way that like most classes don't. A lot of people are like, well, he's going to try to seduce the dragon or whatever. I'm like, that person exists. That stereotype comes from somewhere, but that's not all. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on Bard?
No, I will say, are you watching the clock? Because I know you got an out.
Yeah, in 26 minutes.
Okay, cool.
So real quick before we switch to the next class, I want to interject on the temporary hit points thing.
Okay.
Because they have not, even with all the errata that they've been doing to D&D Beyond, they have not changed this. Armor of Agathis. We all know that spell, right? You get temporary hit points and it does cold damage when you get hit, right? The way it's worded now, the spell ends early if you have no temporary hit points. It doesn't specify temporary hit points from this spell. So I'm sure there's going to be optimizer builds where you take Armor of Agathis and then you take every possible way you can to give yourself more temporary hit points as often as possible so you get the most use out of this first level spell and you're just constantly dealing damage to everything that hits you. That's going to be a power build for sure unless the wording of the spell gets changed.
And I would feel so much differently about that if I believed that was intentional. Right? Like
Yeah.
straight up, that's my take with like all of this stuff. Like all of these like weird accidental interactions on a revision of a decade-old game, like just kind of perplex me a lot of the time.
Yeah.
You can't heal temporary hit points, but you can re-up the pool. You can't add to it, but you can bring it up to the max. So like absolutely there's going to be some Armor of Agathis hijink refueling. Yeah, I don't. Whatever.
Entire
I'm
builds
trying to
around
stay
it.
positive today.
Make entire builds around an Armor of Agathis character. So with the cleric, who wants to go first with your initial thoughts on the cleric?
I have some disappointment with just the 4 subclass format. Like overall, I like the 4 subclass format because it creates like a nice balance across all the classes. But I think only having 4 cleric domains is kind of limiting in a world where you have so many different gods and so many different variations of gods. So from a kind of a narrative standpoint, I'm not a big fan of that. But game design standpoint, I understand why they only did 4 subclasses.
I mean, yeah, I miss my Tempest, but I guess the answer is like you can still run it, right? You can still run a 2014 or whatever, a Xanathar's, a Tasha subclass that's not in the book. Yeah, I like the symmetry in the PHP. It was weird when you're like, I guess wizards are better because there sure are more of them, right? Like I guess they want me to be a wizard. Like it does have like a weird implicit, I don't know, qualitative function when there's more of one than another. So I definitely hear you, Brad. Like, is the Pantheon of the Forgotten Realms well represented into these 4 categories? I don't know. Well, I can see some gaps, but
Well, and then my other thought on cleric is one of the biggest improvements to the cleric isn't in the class itself, but it's the improvement made to the healing spells. The fact that all the healing spells have all doubled the dice, and hopefully that's going to lead to less whack-a-mole scenario, right? Because you're going to be more likely to heal. You're more likely to spend your action to heal your ally when you're giving out a decent amount of hit points in that healing spell.
Yeah.
So that I think is one of the biggest improvements to cleric that's not actually in the class.
I like the new Divine Spark. I think it's just a nice, simple option. You point a finger and you harm or you heal someone. It's simple. If you're a newer player, I think they will appreciate that. If they don't know what to do on a turn, they can always do that well up to once per short rest, I guess. The clerics had the same temporary HP problem because they get potent cantrips. That's what I was trying to remember before. I think it's level 7, maybe, potent cantrips. I can't tell what level they get. It's not called potent cantrips for them, is it? That's what it is. Blessed strikes?
So you're talking about where like the cleric now gets to choose whether or not they are spellcaster focused or melee focused?
I'm talking about the potent spell casting. Add your wisdom modifier to damage deals any cantrip. But there was somewhere the cleric also has the ability to give out temporary HP too when they cast spells. I think maybe it was. I don't know. I can't find it. But there's somewhere in there the cleric can, when they cast a spell, they also give temporary HP out to someone, which is the same problem that World Tree Barbarian had. Just complaining about temporary HP still.
Gotcha.
Also, the last thing I noticed in the cleric spiritual weapon is now a concentration spell. So rest in peace to the spiritual weapon spirit guardians combo. You can no longer do that.
It hurts my heart, but
Pour one
clerics
out.
were OP. Clerics were OP, gang. I mean, we all know it.
Yeah. Early on in fifth edition, I played in a one shot where there were two clerics in the party, and they were both doing spiritual weapon at the same time and spirit guardians at the same time, and it was like a wood chipper. They were just chewing through bad guys. It was crazy.
It's the best Shadowheart strat in Baldur's Gate 3, spiritual weapon, spirit guardians, then Shadowheart just dash around the battlefield, kill everyone.
Yeah. But one of the things I like about the cleric is the choice between the protector and the thaumaturge, where at first level you get to choose if you're going to be a martial cleric or a casting cleric. Like you get you choose the protector, you get the proficiency in martial weapons and heavy armor. If you choose the thaumaturge, you get a bonus to your spellcasting modifier. So spellcasting modifier, or you get bonus to Arcana and Religion skills. I think it's later on you get a bonus to your spellcasting modifier. But there's these choices now in the cleric class, so you can kind of choose the all martial route, or you can choose the all spellcaster route, or you can mix and match as you pick the divine order at level 1, and then is it blessed? Yeah. Blessed strikes at 7th level. You choose between divine strike and potent spellcasting.
I just want to go on record as I don't know if I like it better than destroy undead, but sear undead, a perfect name for an ability. Just like here's radiance. These zombies are cooked. Like I can hear it sizzle. Like sear undead, A+. Good job,
Great.
guys.
And is that the one that is changed because you don't want the undead running off? Like the idea that they changed this because the old turn undead ability caused fear, so like the undead would run away, then you had to go track them down later.
Yeah.
So that's the purpose of this change, right?
No, that still exists. So turn undead you get at level 2, and then as you level up, turn undead used to be destroy undead if it's a certain CR, and there was a table for it. Now it's just like roll d8s for your level. They take that much damage as well as running away. It is a weird issue. I feel like, all right, am I going to hand wave it, or like these zombies are coming back in 3 minutes and you're going to forget about them? Or like, are these undead smart enough to come back after you make them run for the next 10 turns? How long? Like, they're pretty slow. I know they're dashing, but they don't move fast, so they can still see you when they're done.
The new turn undead gives the incapacitated condition.
Oh, is that how they fix it? I know it's still frightened.
Yeah, it's still frightened, so they'll still have disadvantage from being frightened.
Well, I think, but they changed incapacitated things can move now. That was a whole stupid thing. And maybe it's because they changed, right? Or am I getting too many
you're right. I
rules?
just pulled up incapacitated. Yeah, incapacitated doesn't limit movement, so you.
Which was confusing.
Yeah.
But I guess that's why.
But you can only take. It doesn't limit movement, but you can only take one, either action, bonus action, or reaction. So
no, you can't take any. You can't do stuff. All you can do is move.
All you can do is move. Yeah. But so like your undead won't be moving and then using their action to dash.
I see.
Yeah. So I guess that's how they change it. So it still runs away from you like it's scared, but it's not gonna, be gone by the time you're done killing off whatever else you're fighting, I guess.
I still like seer.
Yeah,
it's a great name. It's a great word. All right. Any final thoughts on the cleric? You want to dive into the druid?
Yeah, I'm ready for druid. and I'll just start us on Druid. Obviously the biggest change here is the lack of change to wild shape, right? They went back and forth in playtests as far as, are you going to use templates for your wild shape, or are you going to be able to choose out of them, from the list of monsters? And they decided to go with the latter, but then they added the temporary hit points thing. So, I'm not sure how much I like it. I was an advocate for the template thing myself, but
I also liked the template, the Beast of Air, Beast of Land, Beast of Water, whatever. I liked those. They were simple, easy to use.
Yeah. And I think you could have just added, some options, where the Beast of Land could get wall crawling, or, a pounce or a charge or something like that. So at least you had like 2 or 3 options where you could like make your Beast of Land feel more like a spider than, a wolf or whatever. Right. But I'm curious to see how, again, the temporary hit points thing with the Druid wild shape is going to play out.
In a vacuum, I like it. I think it's a little less confusing to like the second this pool hits 0, it continues through, which is what happened before, but this somehow feels like it has more clarity to me. But then you add on the fact that like people are handing out temporary hit points. It's not quite like healing. It's a separate rule set. It makes me suspicious for shenanigans in the optimization pool. So yeah, we shall see. Again, I don't know if they have considered all those interactions that are going to come from this fundamental change. That scares me.
Druids can prepare all of their spells every day, but they can only swap out 1 known beast form each long rest. So that's the thing.
That's a whole thing.
Yeah. So I guess that they try to make choosing your beast form similar to choosing your spells. So there's kind of a parallel there. So it's, works in a similar way. So if you understand how to choose your spells and cast your spells, you would understand how to choose your beast forms and use your beast forms. So, it's an improvement. I think that's what was it Fred who just said that. It's wild shape is slightly better than 2014. Like it's better, but it's not as good as I wanted it to be. I wanted them to come up with a more creative solution for wild shape.
So there's always that conversation like, hey DM, has my druid seen a dinosaur? Have they had the opportunity to study a T-Rex? It's like, oh man, no, and now I will never show you one. Or like, now I have to show you one because I feel like a jerk if I don't. Even though there was no T-Rex in this arboreal forest we're exploring, but now I guess there is, because otherwise I'm being a jerk.
You don't want a Tyrannosaur in your Dolmenwood?
I mean, I'm not against it, but custom order monsters just it gets into a weird place.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
They removed the restriction on swim speed in wild shape. Before, you couldn't pick a beast with a swim speed before level 4, I think.
Something like that, yeah. So they took that away. I didn't notice that.
Yeah, now it only has the flying speed restriction. It doesn't say anything about swim speed one way or the other. So I assume that if you pick a beast that it's within your CR range and it can swim, you can just do that, because it doesn't say you can't.
Yeah.
No, in the rules doesn't say a dog cannot play basketball. Therefore, you can have a swim speed.
Well, I don't think swim speed is a huge advantage in any real way.
Yeah.
So I'm okay giving out a swim speed at lower levels. That doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
The overall, I like the subclass design of the druids. 2 reasons. I kind of like the balance between land and sea and moon and stars. I think thematically those are all very cool for Druid.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see the the tweaks to Circle of the Stars and then the new Circle of the Sea. Interested to see what my players are going to do with those. The other thing I like about the subclasses with the Druid is the fact that you can use your wild shape to do other stuff. I didn't like being locked into wild shape as one of my key resources as a Druid. Like if I want to play a circle, like I played the Circle of the Stars Druid, and I like the fact that I didn't have to consider using wild shape to turn into stuff. If I want to play my naturey wizard, my what's it, Radagast the Brown, right? I want to play that Druid that's mostly a caster and doesn't really use wild shape. I like the fact that you don't have to turn into stuff anymore. You can use that resource to do other things.
Yeah, like spell slots, convert to spell slots.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that makes Circle of the Land more attractive. It was always like the lesser option, and it felt like Nature Wizard is a class fantasy, right? And it shouldn't have been a weaker one.
Yeah.
Again, we'll see in practice, but I do think they did a better job balancing out most things. I'll leave it at that. Reserve the right to change my mind later.
Yeah.
We should maybe break it off there before we get into discussing the fighter, because I've got to go in a few minutes.
Sure thing.
But overall thoughts on everything we discussed so far. We discussed the rollout of the player's handbook, the very bumpy rollout. Chapter 1, playing the game. Chapter 2, creating a character. Chapter 3, we covered about half of character classes. My overall thoughts are, I kind of like it. I think in general, they done good.
Yeah.
What I've seen so far.
I agree. Like Ryan said early on, I think there's a lot to like here. Clearly, it's not perfect. But I don't know any games that are perfect, or I would be playing that every week at my table. So overall, I think it's a good version of D&D. I'm going to play it for at least a year, maybe 2, to see if I love it or not. And that's where I stand now, eagerly waiting to see the new monster manual to know how much I'm really going to like this edition.
Yes. And it's easy to lose perspective. Like, do you want to spend $50-$60 on this today? You don't have to. And if you wait a few months, you're going to buy one that they fixed. But I don't know another way to spend $50-$60 and have fun once, twice a week with all my friends for years, gang.
Right.
It's pretty good value. I don't know what else. I don't know. We go out to dinner and we spend more than $60.
Yeah, I said that recently in some online discussion. I don't understand why RPG hobbyists are so resistant to spending money on RPG books, because the value you get for a $60 book, is ridiculous.
Yeah.
$30 for Shadow Dark, and you can get hours of hours and hours and weeks and years of entertainment. I played 5th edition for 10 years now. With the exception of the pandemic, almost weekly for 10 years. I definitely got my money's worth out of 5th edition.
Yeah, it's incredible. You can make your own game. Absolutely. I encourage you to. It will take you years. It's a lot more work than you think it is if you haven't started, gang. You can make food at home, but it's nice to go to a restaurant once in a while.
Yeah.
Look at us. We normally only have terrible things to say about Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons, but you see, we can be supportive of their endeavors too. And now we get comments from all the other people.
Yeah. I managed to piss off both sides recently, which felt like an achievement. Everyone was mad at me for a week there.
Whether you hate WotC or you love WotC, you're gonna get comments from the other people. It happens, and you cannot avoid it.
Yeah. I try to find the fun in that instead of getting annoyed by that.
Yeah.
I will say it's always fun sitting down with you guys. I appreciate you in chat. Like, woo, I'm looking forward to years of talking about this book and the other books that are coming and all the cool shit we're gonna do with them.
Oh, whoops! I was looking for this. Mazes and Monsters. Fred, have you seen Mazes and Monsters? It's terrible. Don't watch it.
Poor Tom Hanks.
Don't watch it. Terrible, awful movie. You don't have to watch it. All right, I think that about does it for us then. And we are gonna get. Anybody have any last thoughts?
I'm eager to get into this and start making more content. I've had a couple weeks of downtime because of COVID and I haven't made a video in a while, and I am ready to get back to the grind of cranking out content.
Brad is ready to crank. You heard it here, folks.
Crank them out.
Crank it out. He's gonna crank one. All right, everyone. Thank you for watching. This has been Casual Friday. I am GM Jim.
I'm Brad Wolf from Dire Den.
I'm Ryan Doyle. I'm at Verdigris Table. Come hang out.
All right, everyone. We'll see you next time.